Okay, this is a book review on James R. Davila's Hekhalot Literature and Translation. The book covers a wide variety of the Hekhalot literature, not all of it, but most of it, the most important ones. And there's a lot of misconception, misinformation, even possibly disinformation about what the Merkabah is. Now, if we're talking three-dimensional, figures, we're meditating over this figures and meditations presented by individuals like Junvalo, Melchizedek, and other individuals. I'm not sure where it is that Junvalo or all these other guys got this information on these meditations, because it does not come from any of the texts of the Jewish literature, and this is where most of the information comes from, as far as this is where you would find information in relation to the Merkavah texts. Whatever Merkabah it is that they're talking about, I'm really not sure. Who's to say where they got that from? But now the material covered in these texts are mostly having to do with religious practices, prayer mostly. A great deal of prayers are in these texts, different songs and hymns to God or angels, and there are certain invocations as far as summoning angels in there, but they're not really. There's nothing really in there about any 3D dimensional figures, meditating on those or anything like that. Nothing at all of that nature. Period. They do talk a lot about seals and using seals to summon angels and pass through the 7 chambers of heaven, so that you can have apparently a vision of God sitting on his throne. And the notion of the chariot of ascension is actually interesting, because you're not really ascending, but you're descending to the chariot. And I'm not sure where the notion of ascension is coming from, but before you can ascend, you need to descend in this literature. That's how it's presented. And it's difficult to interpret what exactly all these things really mean, but some of the rituals in there are quite ridiculous. They have people immersing themselves in water 24 times a day, and fasting for 40 days, eating nothing but a morsel of bread and a little bit of water at the end of every day, and you got to do that for 40 days straight. So that's one of the processes in one of these rituals. And then as far as passing the rituals that in which you're passing through the 7 chambers of heaven, you would need to know the name of every single angel that guards every single palace of the heavenly chambers. And you have to have seals made up for, I believe, each and every single one of them. So you would meditate on the names of all these guardians, which are seemingly angels, that are essentially at the gate of each palace or chamber of heaven. And if you don't know the names of them, apparently there can be some nasty results, insanity, death, and a multitude of other things. So, but that's the basis of the material that's covered in these books. And again, I'm not sure where these notions of using a 3-dimensional version of the Seal of Solomon in meditation would allow you to ascend or anything of that nature. And again, if we're talking in relation to the actual Merkavah text, you're descending to the throne, and the ascent process is something completely different, and I haven't really seen a lot of information about that in these texts. There's a few mentions of ascending, but descending to the throne is the main idea of this literature. And so the chariot of ascension I guess, would seem to be, the throne. You're using the throne of God to ascend, and that is the chariot of ascension, essentially, is the throne. And this is my own interpretation. I may not be explaining this correctly, but it's a very, very difficult text to understand, just because for the matter, it seems to be a lot of religious rambling, and they're just talking a lot about mostly angels and the different names of God and Metatron and all those interesting things in there, but it's just really nothing more than a lot of, and it may sound harsh to say this, but it's a lot of religious babbling that may or may not even do anything. Of course, you'd have to be willing to, in order to be able to try these different incantations or invocations or whatever you want to say, or any of these rituals, you'd have to be willing to do these ridiculous practices where you're fasting for an extraordinarily long period of time and doing ridiculous rituals. You just have to put yourself in a dark room for 40 days and eat nothing but morsels of bread and drink minimal amounts of water only in the evening. So it's just you can't even, who's going to do these rituals. So in that case, that's really all I have to say at this point. I just wanted to put together a little review so you guys can see what the book was all about. At $200 price tag, you won't find a lot of useful information in here, really, unless you're willing to do some, like I said, some ridiculous things, ridiculous rituals that may or may not even work. Who's to say? But it is a beautiful piece of translated work. The guy that wrote the book obviously put a lot of time and effort into it, and it's his life's work. It's a beautiful piece of literature, if nothing else, and I do appreciate having that in my collection. But if you're looking to find some rituals to support your ideas of Merkabah meditations by individuals like Davila, Melchizedek, and all that, you won't be very pleased. So I would suggest looking other places to try and see, to confirm if those are valid rituals, valid meditations. But at this point, I would say that they're not at all. I don't know where these guys are coming up with this information, but it's not at all in relation to the real deal. These are ancient texts translated from Hebrew and Aramaic. There may be some Muslim connections. There are Muslim connections as far as where some of this literature came from. Hebrew connections, obviously, but other than that, I really don't know where this information, how long ago these materials were written. It's hard to really say. Okay, so I'll be covering some of the rituals, incantations, invocations within the Hekhalot literature. The first one that I'll be covering will be instructions for the descent to the chariot. Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana resolves to instruct the association. Our Ishmael said, when our Nehunia ben Hakanya, if I can't even pronounce that, but whatever it is, continuing on, that wicked Rome was holding a council against the eminent ones of Israel in order to destroy them. He stood and revealed a secret counsel of eternity, the character that resembles the one who is fit to gaze on the king and the throne, on his adornment, on his beauty, and on the holy living creatures, on the cherubim of might, and on the Ophanim of the Shekinah, on the confounding lightning flash, on the fearsome Hashmal, on Rigyan, again I'm not sure quite how to pronounce that encircles around his throne, on its bridges and on the flames that grow mighty, and ascend between one bridge and another, and on the dusty smoke, and on the wind of the splendor that has raised all the dust of the glowing coals, which spreads over and covers all the chambers of the palace of the Aravat firmament, on the misty clouds of the glowing coals, and on Sariah, prince of the presence, servant of, and then there's a name for Yahweh here, the majestic. What does this character resemble? A man who has a ladder inside his house, on which he ascends and descends, There is no beginning who restrains his hand. Every one who is innocent and void of idolatry, lewdness, bloodshed, slander, and vain oath, profanation of the name, an insolent demeanor, and an unfounded grudge, and he keeps every positive and negative commandment. Rabbi Ishmael said, Rabbi Nahunia ben Hakana said to me, Son of the majestic ones, cheerful is he, and cheerful is the soul of anyone who is innocent, and void of these 8 characteristics that, here's another name for Yahweh, and Sariah, his servant, rejects. He descends and gazes on the majesty, wondrousness, and strange princeliness, majesty of exaltation and princeliness of grandeur that are stirred up before his throne, his glory 3 times every single day on high, from the day that the world was created until now, for praise, with which, and then again the same name for Yahweh, conducts himself on high. Rabbi Ishmael said, When my ears heard this warning, my vigor grew weak. I said to him, My master, if so, there is no end to the matter, for you do not have a man who has breath in him, who is innocent and void of these 8 characteristics, he said to me. Son of majestic ones, if not, stand and bring before me all the mighty men of the association, and all the magnificent ones of the academy, and I will recite before it the mysteries, the things made secret and preserved, wonders in the weaving of the web that is the completion of the world, and upon it, its extolment stands the axle of heaven and earth, on which all the extremities of the earth and inhabited world, and the extremities of the firmaments on high are tied, sewn, fastened, suspended, and stand. And the way of the ladder on high is that its one end is on earth, and its other end is on the right foot of the throne of glory, Ishmael said, Rabbi Ishmael. At once I stood, and I assembled the whole great Sanhedrin, and the small, and the third entrance that is in the house of Yahweh. And he sat upon a bench of pure alabaster that Elisha, my father, gave to me, and behest of her who bore me, who brought it for him in her marriage contract. And there came Rabban Shimon ben Gamaliel, Rabbi Eliezer the Great, Rabbi Elazar ben Dama, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, Jonathan ben Dahavi, Hananiah ben Hakina, Jonathan ben Uziel, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Judah ben Baba. We came and we sat before him, and there were a whole crowd of associates standing on their feet, because they were seeing to the pans of fire and torches of light that they had set a barrier between us and them. And Rabbi Nahunia ben Hakana sat and set out in order all the matters of the chariot, descent and ascent, how one who descends, descends, and one who ascends, ascends. All right, now we're getting on to the next section, the guardian angels of the 6 first palaces. Now, in these here, we have a lot of interesting names, it looks like, for different angels. And I don't even know how I'm going to begin to pronounce these. So I think I'm not going to. I'll just let you know when I'm coming to the names. When a man seeks to descend into the chariot, he calls on Sariah, the prince of the presence, and adjures him 112 times by, and then there's a bunch of different unpronounceable words here with no vowels whatsoever. It's all consonants, mostly T's, W's, Y's. It's incredibly difficult to even begin to imagine how to pronounce these words. I don't understand Hebrew, and I don't read Hebrew, so I'm not going to even try those. So continuing on, and he must be careful not to add to the 112 times, and not to subtract from them. And if he adds or subtracts, his blood is on his own head. But his mouth must bring forth names, and the fingers of his hands must count 112. At once he descends, and has authority over the chariot. Ishmael said, Thus said Rabbi Nahunia ben Hakana, in 7 palaces, and then there's a name for Yahweh, God of Israel sits enthroned, chamber within chamber, and at the entrance of every single palace are 8 guardians. of the threshold, 4 to the right of the lintel, and 4 to the left of the lintel. These are the names of the guardians of the entrance of the first palace. Now I'm going to try and pronounce these. I'm going to butcher them, but these are at least a little bit more pronounceable than the last section. And these seem to be names of angels because they end with an L, such as you may have heard of Elohim, and most of the angels, pretty much all the angels, as far as I know, end with an EL in their pronunciation. That means of God, or of the Elohim, or whatever the case may be. So I will try and read them off here. Dehebael, Gesiriel, Gehiriel, Bezetiel, Tawiphiel, Tehiriel, Matiquiel, and Siwiel. And then there are some who say Sibael. These are the names of the guardians of the entrance of the second place. Palace. Tigriel, Mepitiel, Sirhiel, I'm trying the best I can. Ripael, Shehiriel, there's 2 R's there. Stiriel, Digiel, and Shibaiel. These are the names of the guardians of the entrance of the third palace. Sabwiriel, Riswiswiel, Slimiel, Sibliel, Zahiziliel, that's not right, Hidriel, and Bizdiel. Continuing on. These are the names of the guardians of the entrance of the fourth palace. Phidiel, Geburtliel, Kiswiel, Sakiniel, Stikwiel, Ribiel, Kipiel, and Anaphiel. That's the most clearly pronounceable one. It's actually spelled out. Anaphiel, Anaphiel. These are the names of the guardians of the entrance of the fifth palace. Theliel, Yeziel, Gewiliel, Githwiel, Sapiriel, Napirliel, Giriel, Diriel, and Pelitriel. These are the names of the guardians of the entrance of the sixth palace. Dumael, Caspiel, those are spelled out. The first one's spelled Dumiel. Next one's spelled Qaspiel. The name following that, again, we're back to assumptions here on the pronunciation. Gehigiel. Ooh, this is a hard one. Dispicircibiel. Yeah. Next one. Giriamiel, Basiriel, Mikiliel, and Tawerpriel. So I butchered those. But on to the next section. The terror is at the entrance to the seventh palace. And the entrance of the seventh palace, all the mighty ones stand raging, frightening, powerful, hard, fearsome, and confounding, taller than mountains and sharper than hills. Their bows are drawn, and they are at their faces. The bows are at their faces. Their swords are sharp, and they are in their hands. Lightning bolts drip and go forth from their eyeballs, and pans of fire from their nostrils, and torches of glowing coals from their mouths. They are armed with helmets and coats of mail, and lances and spears are hung for them on their arms for them. Again, redundant. Their horses are horses of darkness, horses of deep darkness, horses of gloom, horses of fire, horses of blood, horses of hail, horses of iron, horses of the misty cloud. The horses upon which they ride stand over mangers of fire filled with glowing juniper coals, and they eat glowing coals out of their mangers, about a measure of 40, don't know what that is, sias, in one mouthful, SCHS. And the measure of the mouth of every single horse is 3 times as much as the measure of the entrance of the mangers of Caesarea. There are rivers of fire beside their mangers, and all their horses drink about the measure of the full canal. I can't even speak, canal of water, and there is in the brook Kidron, which brings out and unites all the rainwater of Jerusalem. A cloud is there above their heads, dripping blood above their heads, and those of their horses. So this is the mark and character of the guardians of the palace, of the seventh palace, and such is the entrance of every single palace. Excuse me while I take a drink. Okay. Next section. Interlude and praise of the descenders to the chariot. And all the descenders to the chariot ascend and are not harmed. Rather, they see all the violence and they descend safely. And they come and they stand and testify to the fearsome and confounding sight, the like of which is not in all the palaces of kings of flesh and blood. And they bless and praise and laud the ornament, and exalt and adorn, to give glory and ornamentation and greatness to, there's that same name for Yahweh, God of Israel, who is happy with the descenders to the chariot, and who would sit and wait for every single one from Israel when he has descended, and he feasts his eyes on the wonderful majesty and the strange rulership of the majesty of exaltation and the rulership of grandeur that throngs before the throne of glory 3 times every single day on high, since the world was created, and up to now, for praise. The King of Israel, the beloved King, the blessed King, the King of majesty, the King of miracle, the upright King, the faithful King, the beloved King, the delectable King, the supporting King, the humbled King, and the afflicted King, the righteous King, the pious King, the holy King, the pure King, the mighty King, the gracious King, the merciful King, the King of kings, and Lord of crowns. Yeah, that's what it said. Again, the same name for Yahweh. God of Israel covets and waits in the manner that he waits for the redemption and for the time of salvation that is kept for Israel, and the destruction of the former temple. When will the descender descend to the chariot? When will he feast his eyes on the majesties on high? When will he hear the end of salvation? When will he see what eye has not seen? When will he ascend and report to the seed of Abraham, who loves him? All right, in the next section, I'll be going over the procedures for passing the guardian angels of the first 5 palaces. Okay, so the next 2 important chapters here from the Hekhalot Rabbati are instructions on passing the guardian angels of the first 5 palaces, and then it looks like it goes on to 6 and 7 after that. So let's continue. Rabbi Ishmael said, "When you come and stand at the entrance of the first palace, take 2 seals in your 2 hands, one of," and this is the name of Yahweh mentioned earlier, "and one of Sariah, prince of the presence. Then, the one of Yahweh, the name for Yahweh again, show it to the one standing at the right, and the one of Sariah. Show it to the ones standing at the left. At once, Rabiel, the prince who is head of the entrance of the first palace, and who is appointed over the first palace, and who stands to the right of the lintel, and to Wiphiel, the prince who stands to the left of the lintel with him. At once he takes hold of you, one from your right, one from your left, until they bring and deliver you over, and introduce you and admonish Tigriel, concerning you, the prince who is chief of the entrance of the second palace, and stands to the right of the lintel, and Matiphael, the prince who stands to the left of the lintel with him. Show them 2 seals, one of," and this is a different name for Yahweh, and then there's some unpronounceable other name for the prince of the presence. And then it says, then there's another name that it talks about for Yahweh. It says, the one of, then that name, showed to the one standing to the right. And then there's another name for the Prince of Presence. The one of, that name, Prince of the Presence, showed to the one standing to the left. At once they take hold of you, one from your right and one from your left, until they bring you and deliver you over and introduce you and admonish Sawiriel, concerning you, the prince who is head of the entrance to the third palace, and stands to the right of the lintel. Riswiswiel, the prince who stands to the left of the lintel with him. Show them 2 seals. One, and this is another name for Yahweh, and one for, and apparently this is another name for the Prince of the Presence. And this is just my opinion. Possibly at this point, I'm assuming that as you descend further through the chambers, the names change, and perhaps they have a deeper meaning or deeper understanding for the Prince of the Presence, whomever that is, and Yahweh himself. So then you have the names changing, it would seem, each time you're descending into a different chamber. So continuing on, it talks about showing seals to the right and left. And they bring 2 princes before you, and 2 princes from behind you, and they deliver you over, and they introduce you, until they bring you and admonish Phidiel concerning you, the prince who is the chief of the entrance of the 4th palace, and who stands on the right of the lintel, and Geburtiel, the prince who stands on the left of the lintel with him. Show them 2 seals. And again, it has different names for Yahweh and the Prince of the Presence. This one actually seems to be, these 2 seem to be actually angelic names at this level. So it would seem that Yahweh has an angelic name, and the Prince of the Presence also has an angelic name at this stage. So the first name for Yahweh apparently here is an angelic name, which is Zabwiriel, spelled Z-B-W-R-Y-L. And these are why these names are so difficult to pronounce, is because there's no vowels in between them, and you kind of have to make them up as you go along, because it's just really impossible to pronounce them otherwise without having something in between, like a vowel. Okay, and the next one, for the name for the Prince of the Presence here, is Merkavah. That's the best I can say it. M-R-G-Y-W-Y-L. And it says, to show Zabwiriel Yahweh, show to the one standing to the right, and the one of Megiri. Again, these are a little bit difficult to pronounce. Mergiwiel, show to the one standing to the left. At once they take hold of you, one from your right and one from your left, until they bring you and deliver you over, and introduce and admonish Thaiel concerning you, the prince who is the head of the entrance of the 5th palace, and stands to the right of the lintel, and Riziel, the prince who stands to the left of the lintel with him. Show to them 2 seals, one of Tuwitri Biel Yahweh. Again, here's another name for Yahweh, but this one is an angelic name. And one of, this one is not an angelic name for Prince of Presence. So there's those names again, and it asks to show the seals to the right and to the left, of course. And at once they take hold of you, and they bring you 3 princes from before you and 3 princes from behind you, and perhaps. Okay, and continuing on, I guess I'll read this section too. This is the interruption of the descent of Rabbi Nehunia for a question. Because the guardians of the entrance of the 6th palace used to destroy some from the descenders to the chariot, and not among the ones who descend to the chariot without authority, they gave orders concerning them, and they beat them and burned them, and set the others in their place. But the others who stand instead of them, their nature is also such. They are not afraid, nor does it occur to them to say, why are we burned? For what reason do we get a beating? Because we destroy some from the descenders to the chariot, and not among those who descend to the chariot without authority. And still, such is the nature of the guardians, and the nature of the 6th palace. Rabbi Ishmael said, the whole association said to me, Son of majestic ones, you, since you rule over the light of the Torah, just like Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana, show him, bring him back, so that he may sit with us from the vision where he is peering at the vision of the chariot. And let him say to us, what is some of the descenders to the chariot, and not among the descenders to the chariot, whom the guardians of the entrance of the 6th palace assault, but they do not attack the descenders to the chariot in any way. What is the difference between the ones and the others? Rabbi Ishmael said, "At once I took a strip of parhaba wool, and I gave it to Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva gave it to a servant of ours, saying, 'Go and place the strip beside a woman who has been immersed, but her immersion was void, and have her immersed again, so that if this woman comes and recounts the condition of her menstrual cycle before the association, it is well known that one would declare her forbidden to her husband, and the majority would declare her permitted. Say to this woman, touch this strip with the tip of the middle finger of your hand. Do not press the fingertip upon it, but like a man who takes a fiber from his eyeball which fell in, pushing it with a light touch.' They went and did so, and put down the strip before Rabbi Ishmael. He inserted it into a branch of myrtle full of foliatum that was soaked in pure balsam. And they set it down on the knees of Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana. At once they dismissed him from before the throne of glory, where he had been sitting and feasting his eyes on the wonderful majesty and the strange rulership, on the majesty of exaltation and the rulership of grandeur that throng before the throne of glory 3 times every single day, on high, since the world was created, and until now for praise. And we inquired him what was some from the descenders to the chariot, and not among the descenders to the chariot. He said to us, These are mortals whom the descenders to the chariot have taken. They station them above them, or that they seat them before them, and say to them, Watch and see, give ear, and write everything that we say, and everything that we hear from before the throne of glory. But these mortals are not fit for such. Therefore the guardians of the entrance of the 6th palace used to attack them. Be careful that you select for yourselves ritually fit mortals, and that they are from the well-tested associates." Okay, now we're getting back to the palaces again, instructions for the descent. This time it's the 6th and 7th palaces. "When you come and stand at the entrance of the 6th palace, show 3 seals of the guardians of the entrance of the 6th palace to Caspiel, the prince whose sword is drawn in his hand, and lightning bolts drip and go forth from it. And it was roused against anyone who is not fit to gaze at the king and the throne. And there is no being who stays his hand, and his sword cries out and says, Ruin! And he stands in the lintel to the right. And show 1 seal to Dumael. And is his name indeed Dumael? Is it not? Oh boy, I'm not going to even try and pronounce that. That's a really long one. I'll just read the letters. Byrghydrpyr. Why is his name called Dumael? Rabbi Ishmael said. Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana said thus, Every single day a heavenly voice goes forth from the Aravat firmament and proclaims and says in the law court on high. Thus says, and there's an extremely long name for Yahweh, God of Israel, call him Dumael after my name. What I see remaining silent, so does Dumael. His domain is a lintel of the right side, but Caspiel, the prince, used to thrust him aside, yet he has nothing against him. No grudge, and no hatred, and no jealousy, and no rivalry, but is one for my glory, and the other is for my glory. Zahiriel and Pili, I'm not sure who that is, show these 2 seals, whoever he is, to Caspiel, and show, there's another name, not sure what that is, spelled Brwnyh, to Dumael the prince, upright and humble prince. At once Caspiel would draw his bow and sharpen his sword, and bring to you a tempest wind, and set you in a wagon of brightness, and cause to be blown before you about the measure of 8,000 myriad horns, and 3,000 myriad trumpets, and 4,000 myriad clarions. And Dumael the prince bears a gift. He goes before you. And what is the gift? Rabbi Ishmael said. Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana said thus, This gift that Dumael the prince bears before the wagon of this man who has merit and descends to the chariot is not a gift of silver and not of gold, but it is that they attribute merit to this man, and they ask him nothing. Not at the 1st palace, not the 2nd, not the 3rd, not the 4th, not the 5th, not the 6th palace, and not even the 7th palace, but he shows them seals, and they leave him alone, and he enters. And at the entrance of the 6th palace, Dumael the prince, guardian of the still, of the right belonging to the entrance of the sixth palace. He sits to the right of the sixth palace on a bench of pure stone, which is the splendor of luminaries of the firmament and the creation of the world. And then there's an incredibly long name for Yahweh, God of Israel. And Dumael the prince receives him with a friendly, beautiful face. He seats him on the bench of pure stone, and he sits beside him on his right. And he would say to him two things. Before you I testify and forewarn you that the descender does not descend to the chariot, except he who has in himself these two characteristics. He is one who has read the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, and he studies traditions, midrash, laws, lore, and interpretation of laws, forbidden and permitted action. Or he is one who has confirmed every negative commandment that is written in the Torah, and he has kept all the prohibitions of the laws, and of the customs, and of the instructions which were said to Moses at Sinai. If he says to him, to Dumael the prince, I have in me one of these two characteristics, Dumael the prince binds himself to Gabriel the scribe, and he writes the parchment for him, and he hangs the parchment on the pole of the wagon of this man, which parchment says, such and such is the Torah of so and such are his deeds, and he seeks to enter before the throne of his glory. When the guardians of the entrance of the seventh palace would see Dumael, Gabriel, Caspiel, that they would come before the wagon of this man who has merit, and descends to the chariot, they would cover their faces and sit down, for they were raging and standing, unstirring their drawn bows, and returning their sharpened swords to their sheaths. Nevertheless, it is necessary to let them feast their eyes on a great seal and a fearsome crown. And there's an incredibly long name for Yahweh, God of Israel. And they would enter before the throne of his glory and make before him all kinds of melody and song, making melody and coming before him, until they bring him up and seat him beside the cherubim, beside the Ophanim, and beside the holy living creatures. And he sees wonders and mighty acts, majesty and greatness, holiness, purity and awe, humility and uprightness in that hour. Rabbi Ishmael said, all the associates are comparable to this character, to a man who has a ladder inside his house, on which he would ascend and descend. There is no being who restrains his hand. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the one who is wise in mysteries and the Lord of secrets. And also I should mention that when it talks about the four living creatures, it's referring to, essentially it seems to be that these are four beings that hold up the throne. One is of an ox, one is a lion, one is of an eagle, and one is of a man. And these are supposed to be, if I'm getting this right, the wheels of the chariot. They also kind of look like, according to this, they would either appear as those four creatures or spinning fiery coals, kind of like wheels. I may have heard of wheels and stuff like that before. And it's very vague as to what they look like or what they are. Those are just some of the ideas that those creatures might be. So, with that, that's the end of the descent into those palaces. And in the next one, I'll go over the names of the guardian angels of the entrance to the seventh palace. Okay. So on to the next part. The names of the guardian angels of the entrance to the seventh palace. Rabbi Ishmael said, Rabban Shimon ben Gamaliel was enraged with me. He said to me, can't pronounce that word. It's spelled ZHPNWRY apostrophe Y. Very nearly reprimanded us and crushed us like bran flour. Why is it that you have committed a willful error with us, when you imagine that Jonathan ben Uzziel is an inferior man in Israel? What if he descended and just came and stood at the entrance of the seventh palace without a seal? What would have happened to him? There would be just enough time for him to squeeze his eyes shut until the guardians of the entrance of the seventh palace brought the decreed annihilation upon him. Rabbi Ishmael said, I went and was angry against Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana, my master, saying, the patriarch is angry with me. Why do I believe? He said to me, Son of majestic ones, if not, what honor do I have among you? I have placed in your mouths Torah, prophets, writings, Mishnah and Midrash, laws and lore and interpretation, laws of forbidden and permitted action, except for the secrets of Torah, which I have hidden from you. Would you have come and appeared before me at all? I know why you have come. You have come only concerning the guardians of the entrance of the seventh palace. Go and say to the patriarch, as for all the guardians of the entrances of the six palaces, it is permissible to invoke the names of every single one of them, and to attain them. But, as for the guardians of the entrance of the seventh palace, the rumor of them confounds a man, and he cannot attain to them, because every single one of them, his name, is called by the name of the King of the world. I have not specified them. Now, since you say to me, specify the names, come in and stand on your feet, and every single one of you, when his name issues from my mouth, bend down and fall on your faces. At once came in all the mighty ones of the association, and of all the magnificent ones of the academy, and stood on their feet before Rabbi Nehunia ben Hakana. He would recite a name, and they would fall on their faces, and the scribes would write. Okay, so here we go. On to the angels of the descent journey. These are the names of the guardians of the entrance of the seventh palace. Again, this is one of the many names for Yahweh. The honored and lovely prince. Then there's another name for Yahweh. The honored, lovely, and fearsome prince. Tirgigil Yahweh, the honored, lovely, fearsome, and confounding prince. Nagurniel Yahweh, and the honored, lovely, fearsome, confounding, and worthy prince. Oh boy, these are difficult. Nawir Peniel Yahweh, the honored, lovely, fearsome, confounding, worthy, and ornamented prince. Nadwiriel Yahweh, the honored, lovely, fearsome, confounding, worthy, ornamented, and powerful prince. This is hard. Sistitiel Yahweh, the honored, lovely, fearsome, confounding, worthy, ornamented, powerful, and magnificent prince. Anaphael Yahweh, the honored, lovely, fearsome, confounding, worthy, ornamented, powerful, strong, upright, and valiant prince. Okay, almost getting out of breath here on this one. The prince whose name is mentioned before the throne of his glory 3 times every single day on high, since the world was created, and until now for praise. Why? Because the seal ring of the seal heaven and earth is delivered into his hand. Okay, next section. Adoration of the angel Anaphael in heaven. And when all who are on high see him, they bow down and fall and abase themselves before him, which is unheard of on high. If you say they do not fall before the Prince of Presence, it is rather apart from those who stand before the throne of his glory, for they do not prostrate themselves to the Prince of the Presence. But before Anaphael, the Prince, even they prostrate themselves with permission and willingly. There's an extraordinarily long name for Yahweh, God of Israel. Okay, so now we're on to the angels of the ascent journey. These are the names of the guardians of the entrance of the seventh palace of the descent. Explication of the names of the ascent. Nawurpeniel Yahweh, the honored, the lovely, the fearsome prince, who is called, can't pronounce that, Yahweh. Deliquiel Yahweh, the honored, lovely, and fearsome prince, who is called Lobikapiel Yahweh. Yakiriel Yahweh, the honored, lovely, and fearsome prince, who is called Terigiel Yahweh. Yel Yahweh, the honored, lovely, and fearsome prince, who is called Beneniel Yahweh. Nawurpianiel Yahweh, the honored, lovely, fearsome prince, who is called Sedekiel, not even close, Yahweh. Nerwiriel Yahweh, the honored, the lovely, the fearsome prince, who is called Zezwiliel Yahweh. Anaphael Yahweh, the honored, the lovely, fearsome, Confounding, worthy, ornamented, powerful, magnificent, strong, upright, and valiant prince, who is called Twipriel Yahweh. Okay. Now the names and status of Nephiel. I'm not sure if reading these texts are absolutely necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and read them anyways. The next section will be the terrors of the holy living creatures. That might be interesting. But back to the name and status of Nephiel. And why is his name called Nephiel? Because of the branch of the crowns of crowns, which is placed on his head, which overshadows and covers all the chambers of the palace of the Aravat firmament, like the one who formed primordial creation. What about the one who formed primordial creation? A vision is written about him. His effulgence covered the heavens. Likewise, Nephiel, the prince, the servant who is called by the name of his Lord. Why is he cherished and honored more than all the guardians of the entrances of the palaces? Because he opens the doors of the entrance of the seventh palace, and he closes them before the throne of his glory, which is set up from the mist, and stands opposite the entrance of the seventh palace. The holy living creatures are opposite the entrance of the seventh palace, and the cherubim and the Ophanim are opposite the entrance of the seventh palace. There are 256 faces on all of the holy living creatures opposite the entrance of the seventh palace. Okay, next section, the terrors of the holy living creatures. Greatest of all, there are 512 eyes in the four living creatures opposite the entrance of the seventh palace. Of them, all the forms of the faces are faces of 16 by 16 faces, which belong to every single living creature opposite the entrance of the seventh palace. When a man who would seek to descend into the chariot, Nephiel would open the doors of the entrance of the seventh palace for him. This man would enter and stand at the threshold of the entrance of the seventh palace, and the holy living creatures would lift up on him 512 eyes, and every single eye of one of the holy living creatures is split open like the measure of a great winnower's sieve, and the appearance of their eyes is like they dart, like lightning bolts. Besides, there are the eyes of the cherubim of might, and the Ophanim of the Shekinah, which resemble torches of light, flames of glowing coals of juniper. And this man would be in a cold sweat and shrinking back and shaking. He would be confounded, confused, and overcome, and falling backward. But Nephiel, the prince, would support him. He and the 63 guardians of the entrances of the palaces, all of them would help him and say to him, "Do not fear, O son of the beloved seed. Enter and see the king in his beauty. You are not destroyed, and you are not burned." In this next short section, the descender to the chariot reaches the throne of God, and they place in him vigor. At once, one blows of the horn from above the firmament that is over their head, and the holy living creatures cover their faces, and the cherubim and the Ophanim turn back their faces, and he enters and stands before the throne of his glory. Another interesting couple of parts here. First, the test at the entrance to the sixth palace. And I saw something like Hashmael was binding itself and standing and distinguishing among the descenders to the chariot, between him who is fit to descend to the chariot and him who is unfit to descend to the chariot. If he was fit to descend to the chariot, when they would say to him, "Enter," he would not enter. They would say again to him, "Enter." At once he would enter. They would praise him, saying, "Certainly, this is one of the descenders to the chariot." But if he was unfit to descend to the chariot, when they would say to him, "Enter," and he would enter, at once they would cast upon him iron axes. So this is the first test of the entrance to the sixth palace. And then there is next section called the water test in the sixth palace. Because the guardians of the entrance of the sixth palace cast and throw upon him 1,000 waves of waters. But there is not really even one drop there. If he says, "These waters, what is their nature?" At once they run after him with stoning, saying to him, "Fool! Perhaps you are of the seed of those who kissed the calf, and you are unfit to feast your eyes on the king and his throne." If he is such, a heavenly voice goes forth from the Aravat firmament, saying, "You have spoken well. He is of the seed of those who kissed the calf. He is unfit to feast his eyes on the king and his throne. he does not depart from there until they cast upon him 1,000 iron axes. And then after following this, there's a bunch of different hymns and songs, and they're actually pretty useless at this point. So nothing I'm seeing immediately here for rituals or any invocations or anything of that nature just yet. So as far as the Hekhalot Rabbati goes, that's pretty much the most interesting parts of it. The next I may cover sections of the Sar Torah, the Prince of the Torah. So for now, that's the end of the Hekhalot Rabbati. Okay.